Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Monday, July 20th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. Let's begin in Portland, Oregon, where protests have escalated each night since the first night we reported on, where federal authorities who were in unmarked vehicles and in general camouflage without any identification as to what agency they were with or the fact that they were with the federal agency to begin with, since those individuals have been scooping up protesters off the street with no formal arrest. No one was read their Miranda rights. They were their heads were covered and taken to a facility that hours later, once the person or the protester was released, they came to find out that it was a federal building. That was a response to ongoing protests that have been happening in Portland for some time. And I want to be sure, as I get ready to go into what's new, that I establish the baseline of what we know. We know that these protests have been crushed because of graffiti, and a few broken windows. Now, we have seen this directly from, and I showed you images on Friday. If you watched the YouTube version of the podcast, you saw the videos, or you saw the images of graffiti that were sent out by the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. Chad Wolf, who is over these officers, these authorities, these feds who are in Portland. He wanted to make sure that the city was safe from graffiti. And he even said, remember, he even said that one building even had to have 47 coats of paint on it, because every time a building is graffitied, it has to be painted over. I'm taking this much time to give you and to remind you of the backdrop for all of this, because I want you to understand the disproportionate level of response from the federal government to crush these inherently left-wing protests. I slid that in there, but that's going to be critically important in a few minutes. These are inherently left-wing protests, inherently about liberation, about justice, about Black Lives Matter. It is a continuation of the protests and the uprising that took place in the aftermath of George Floyd's brutal murder in Minneapolis. So all of these things are interconnected, and I want you to understand that this disproportionate response from the government is 100% ideological. It has nothing to do with safety. So much so that the people who the feds are now gassing, tear gassing, using flashbangs, brutalizing. I have a couple of clips. The people that they are brutalizing are the people directly from this community. Now, to be sure, I 100% believe that if the demographics of the protesters were any different, then somebody probably would have been killed by these federal officers by now. But even though the demographics are a bunch of middle-aged, middle-income, white people, white soccer moms, wine moms, solidarity with them, right? I'm not saying that to insult them whatsoever. I'm saying that so that you can get a clear picture of who's out in these streets protesting at this point. Even though they are probably the quintessential example of the quote-unquote community that this next clip is going to try to conjure up in your mind. Let me set it up properly. I'm getting ready to play a clip of Donald Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows. And in this clip, this is what they're promoting. This is what Trump's campaign, they're actually spreading this all across Twitter. This particular clip, he talks about keeping the community safe. And as you listen to him, you can clearly understand that he is sending a dog whistle to make white suburbia afraid of the chaos and the anarchy that's happening in Portland. Well, the funny thing is the people who are out there protesting are from white suburbia. So who exactly are you protecting white suburbia from? White suburbia? Listen to this clip.
But it's really about keeping our communities safe. And the president's committed to do that. Some of the unrest that we saw even in the last month or so, but particularly last night and in the week leading up to it in Portland, it's just not acceptable when you look at communities not being safe and not upholding the rule of law. So Attorney General Barr is weighing in on that with Secretary Wolf, and you'll see something rolled out this week as we start to go in and make sure that the communities, whether it's Chicago or Portland or Milwaukee or someplace across the heartland of the country, we need to make sure that our communities are safe.
Our communities are safe. Our communities are safe. He throws in Chicago for good measure. But what's happening in Portland is being led by soccer moms, wine moms, solidarity. Again, I don't say that to mock them. I think it's cool as hell that they're out there on the front line. I'll put some pictures on the screen for those of you who are watching the podcast. But as you can see, these are soccer moms. These are self-identified Karens who are going, the good Karens, the good kind, the ones that are willing to be accomplices and not just allies behind a computer screen. Who are you keeping the community safe from? And this is why I said it is inherently a left-leaning protest that is being crushed by a system that is inherently right-wing. So they will, of course, they will never discuss this right now. What's happening right now? They will not discuss it in context of left versus right, of progressivism or liberation, depending on what brand of leftism you subscribe to. I personally subscribe to liberation of all people. It will not be discussed in those terms because the last thing they need seen across the screen, across the televisions, across the country, across the internet are a bunch of soccer moms being associated with left-leaning politics. But those moms are out there for liberation, just so that you're sure, just so that we're clear. And so the brutal crackdown, and again, I have to show you the images. Here's some video of, and I apologize to the ones who are just listening to the podcast, but you're gonna hear a tremendous flashbang as moms who are protesting at the same federal building where everything has been jumping off. They have flashbangs thrown at them. Moms, like who are you protecting the community from? This is the community, right? And I'm using very specific language because we know wrapped into that jargon of community is the idea of the otherification of non-white people, right? Like if you're not white, then you're not viewed as part of the community. So I'm arguing this based on the same language that they utilize, right? They're using the language of community to vilify into the other black people and non-white people. Just to be sure that you understand that I understand what the hell is going on here. But even in that attempt, this is the exact same community that they purport to be defending. So who are you defending? Who are you protecting and serving? An inherently right-wing fascistic police state. That's what they're protecting and serving. That's who they're protecting. And they are protecting that system from anyone who would challenge that system. We established this during the Minneapolis uprising. We saw out in Seattle, we saw in Buffalo how they cracked the skull. I got to check on that man. How is that man doing? I'll find out. I just tweeted it out in case someone knew. But that we saw this coming. We saw the evolution from police brutality being limited expressly. Like police brutality exists. Let me correct. I want to change that sentence. Allow me to change that sentence. Police brutality exists across the board, right, in all races. But the police state has been refined, practiced, and honed in the black community. Police assault on black lives happens at a disproportionate rate. It should not happen at all, but if we break it down by race, we see that it disproportionately happens to black people as a percentage of this nation. So that said, when we think about police brutality and when we've seen police brutality across the last generations, it has been something that has been brought to light by the black community because we know what has been happening in our community forever. It's changing. The nature of it is changing. It is not just racially based. It is ideologically based. Because now you're seeing not just black people get brutalized by the police, you're seeing a bunch of white folks get brutalized by the police. And what's the common thread? It's obviously not race. It's what we fight for. It's what we fight against. Even more specifically, the fact that we fight against the police state brings down the wrath of the police state on whoever is standing in the way of the police state. So the common thread now goes far beyond just fighting for liberation for black lives, fighting against the brutal assault of black people and murder of black people at the hands of the police. Now it's a fight against the police state, which we've been telling folks forever has always existed in the black community. And so now this has spilled over in a very public, very radical way into the white communities. I mean, when I saw the white woman get beat down by police officers in Seattle, she was on a bicycle and she was wearing a pink bicycle helmet. I mean, she's like the quintessential middle-income, middle-aged white woman get tackled by the police. I knew something had fundamentally changed in this country. And what fundamentally changed is that people can see for themselves that the police state is a problem that must be challenged head on. And it's not just black folks, but now white folks who are simply protesting, like literally expressing their First Amendment rights, are getting the full assault of the federal government. Well, one, that's because we did not address this when it was a problem in the black community, because a lot of you honestly just didn't believe that it was this big of a problem. Now, I'm not going to keep telling you I told you so, but we've been trying to tell you as a black community for generations that this police state was a tremendous problem. But now that you're out there with us, and in many cases in these clips, you're going to see it's all white people. It is all white people and mainly white moms. So the real question now becomes is, who the hell is the federal government and all these policing agencies protecting? If they're not even protecting the quote unquote community that they dog whistled over, these are the white suburban moms. So who are they protecting? And from whom are they protecting them? The fact of the matter is they are protecting the federal government and they're protecting the local and state governments from an inherently left-wing liberation movement, because this government is intrinsically a right-wing fascistic police state, and they just can't have any protest against it, even if it's a bunch of soccer moms. You get it? Okay. Well, in good news, I found Martin Gugino. He is the gentleman that was brutalized by the police in Buffalo, New York. He is on Twitter and he has been tweeting lately, so that's good news. If you want to follow him at Martin Gugino, Gugino. So let's keep talking about this, because I think that's the most critical thing to come out of the conversation of what's happening in Portland. This crackdown that's coming from the federal government, this crackdown from the Trump administration, quite literally is an affront to the people, all the people. And everyone needs to see it very clearly for what it is. The fact that you stand up for black lives, okay, means that you must stand against this government. And that is because of how this government has been designed to flourish at the expense of black people, on the back of black people. The police state is quite literally, I mean, if you just, I don't even have to go through the data. Look at the data and you ask me, you tell me who this entire police state was designed to flourish off of, to thrive off of, to get increase in budgets because of, to build more prison cells because of. So if you are fighting on behalf of black lives, you are inherently fighting against the United States government. Welcome, comrade. I'm laughing about it because I don't think people realize the extent to which the moment they stood up for black people, they would find themselves receiving the full force of the federal government brought down on them. Now, and again, I want to be clear. This is politically ideological. This is why the moment is important. I want to stress to you why the moment is important. Because at the intersection of blackness in America exist all of the issues, like all of them. The problem of the police state, the problem of systemic racism, the problem of economic exploitation, the problem of income inequality. All of it exists at the intersection of just being black in this country. James Baldwin said it like this.
When you try to stand up and look the world in the face like you had a right to be here, when you do that, without knowing that this is the result of it, you have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world.
I'm sorry, what? You mean to tell me that the moment we try to simply stand up and assert our right to be here, we have, without even knowing it, we have attacked the entire power structure of the Western world. So when you stand up with black people, you are, without even realizing it, confronting the entire power structure of the Western world. Why? Because what was done to black people in order to build this Western civilization was exploitation, economic exploitation, was the vilification and the dehumanization of us to justify slavery, an inherently racist system of Jim Crow, of redlining, of the school to prison pipeline, of for-profit prisons. Like all of these things are being built on the backs of black lives. The economic exploitation that we talk about all the time as progressives, as leftists, it continues to exist in the black community, but it goes even further than that, because once you stand up, like James Baldwin said, as an individual, as a black person, you stand up and assert your right to be here. You've challenged not only America, you've challenged the entirety of Western civilization. Meaning it is beyond America, it is international. So when you stand up for black lives, to all the soccer moms who are like, we don't understand what's going on and why it's happening like this, why are they throwing gas at us? Because you're standing up for black lives. Standing up for black lives inherently challenges Western civilization. Challenging Western civilization not only means you challenge America, but it also means that you're challenging this international order that allows the global South to be obliterated and plundered on behalf of the quote unquote developed world. It is the very system that continues the exploitation in Africa, continues to drop bombs for profit across the Middle East, that a system that continues to destabilize and overthrow democracies, democratically elected leaders, in order to install right-leaning dictators that will allow the U.S. government and the rest of the Western world to come in and exploit the resources in that nation. So you're not only challenging America's police state, but you're challenging the very nature of imperialism and exploitation and capitalism across the globe, and you thought that you were just showing up to a protest. Oh, no. Because when you're fighting on behalf of black lives, what was needed to create America on the backs of black lives is a system that still exists, just in a different form. We still exploit labor. Explicit slavery still exists, but wage slavery exists in tremendous numbers. Child labor across the globe, the exploitation of human lives for profit, that still exists. And that system didn't go anywhere. We just sanitized it and exported it. We sanitized and outsourced it. So the very problems that existed, the underlying... Look, folks, if you're out there protesting for black lives, you didn't even realize it, but you're actually protesting against capitalism. And that's why this government is bringing everything down. They won't tolerate I was going to go through item by item and explain to you, but at the core of it, if you're protesting on behalf of black lives, you are inherently fighting against capitalism. Okay? All right. So if you need to understand why it is that you are like, I'm just a soccer mom. I just picked up Sally from her ballet, probably not because of COVID-19, but you get the picture. You don't understand why the government is treating you the way that it's treating you. That's because it understands very clearly the line between our protest for black lives and the line that it takes you directly to challenging this exploitative capitalist system. They understand that, and that's why they have to crush you, Mom. what's fascinating to me, the bravery of all of the protesters who are willing to sacrifice their potential lives, and expose themselves to COVID-19 on behalf of justice, on the behalf, and of course, every person that's out there is not going to have the same idea of justice, but they understand intuitively that there's something wrong with this government. There's something wrong with how the government is responding to protests, largely peaceful protests. We'll talk about, the validity of violent protests on another episode, but these soccer moms are out here, they're like, we're peaceful. What's going on? I don't understand what's happening to my country. And then they generally blame it all on Donald Trump. And I would give you this. Donald Trump has a lot of culpability in this moment because his ego pushes him beyond the stress point in America. This is what I mean. The ruling regime of this country understands that generally there's a breaking point for the people, that the people will overthrow this regime. And they generally try to operate as far as they can within the margins. They're going to push the people as far as they possibly can without overstepping a certain bound because they understand they need the consent of the governed to continue exploiting all the wealth that they possibly can on behalf of the ruling elite. One regime. I want us to be clear. There is one regime, two warring factions. Democrats, Republicans serve the same ideological regime within the margin of error. Democrats are only going to go so far. Republicans go a little bit further, but they still operate within those same parameters of neoliberal economic policies here domestically and imperialism globally, neoconservative imperialism globally, right? So Donald Trump is an outlier in that he doesn't give a shit about the people's, the amount that the people can take. His ego is preeminent for him. He has no concern about preserving the institutions. He has no concerns about even preserving the regime. He will burn it all down for the sake of his ego. He will burn the Constitution to embers on behalf of his ego. So I will give you that Donald Trump is a unique outlier in this system and one that is a very dangerous threat. And I think anybody who's reasonable and rational has to make that same conclusion because, look at literally, he has his Gestapo grabbing people off of the streets, blindfolding them, taking them to undisclosed locations only to release them later. So I want to be clear that Donald Trump is a threat above and beyond the ongoing threat that this current regime presents to all of us on an everyday basis. Okay, sorry about that tangent, but I just had to put that out there. That the fact that Donald Trump is a useful target in terms of blaming this moment on because he is a threat above and beyond what created this moment in the first place. What created this moment in the first place is everything that I outlined, right? That anytime you stand up on behalf of Black lives, if you're doing it right, you're standing up against capitalism. And if you're standing up against capitalism, you can expect in some form or fashion this regime to come down on your head. But I do believe that it's going to get misinterpreted right now in this moment because of how buffoonish and how out of pocket Donald Trump really is and how much of a serious threat that he really is. Sorry, I did that tangent twice. What I really wanted to talk about in this segment was the fact that we have people who are putting their lives on the line because of justice, juxtaposed to people who are putting their lives on the line because they don't want to wear a mask. I talked about this in great detail last week, but I just think that you have to be able to see, we got to juxtapose those two and see the qualitative difference. But also, it's clear to most people, the qualitative difference. But what's difficult is for us to understand that underneath that, the fact that they will equate risking their lives to not wear a mask as something as equally as important as you risking your life for justice. Therein lies one of the most difficult challenges that we have in this country. It is going to be extremely difficult for us to progress as a people in this country, as a humanity for that matter, when we're dealing with people who draw an equivalence between their ignorance, their rejection of science, their rejection of the common good, their refusal to work on behalf of helping others by simply putting on a damn mask. They equate their fight against a mask with your fight against police brutality and the police state in this country. And I believe without a shadow of a doubt that that is the preeminent problem that we are facing in this generation that must be solved.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions.
And here we go. At this point in every single episode, I'd like to take a minute to thank the people who make the show possible, our patrons. Very special welcome to D-Lop. Thank you for becoming a patron. John Colwill, thank you for becoming a patron. Peace Forward, thank you for becoming a patron. Anonymous, thank you for becoming a patron. Joan Ignacy Alario Piedra, thank you for becoming a patron. I think I got that right. Magdalene Powers, thank you for becoming a patron. And Jessica Sabadin, thank you for becoming a patron. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, uncut, unfiltered, unedited interviews, none of the commercial interruptions, and you give me the ability to speak power to the powerless, whether the powerful like it or not. You know what I mean?
Welcome back to The Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
All right, y'all. Okay. All right, go over to patreon.com/The BPD Show, become a patron, support the show, and get access to some of my most embarrassing moments. I tweeted out something yesterday. It was, oh my goodness, it was hilarious. And I'm not going to say it publicly. I'm going to say it privately. I deleted that thing so quick. But let's just say I'm glad I don't take myself too seriously. And I'm also glad I know that at the end of the day, I'm not that smart. Because when my brain shuts off, it shuts completely the hell off. When I'm on, I'm on, okay? I know that. When I'm on it, I'm on it. But boy, when I miss, do I miss. Patreon.com/The BPD Show. I just want to get back to these protesters. I am really ecstatic about the fact that the nature of protests in this country is evolving far beyond the normal people that you would expect to protest. And I think the trigger point for that was the cruelty that we saw in the murder of George Floyd. That triggered a lot of people to come out and protest in a way that I don't think we've seen in definitely not in my lifetime. Perhaps the civil rights movement, but I'll leave it to the scholars to parse the difference in terms of demographics and size, et cetera, et cetera. But what I can say, certainly in my lifetime, I have not seen a group of protesters so consistently diverse, fighting on behalf of Black lives. And once you came out there to fight on behalf of Black lives and you saw how ridiculous this system really was, I think you have to start questioning what's really going on here. Because it's not just the brutality against Black lives. It's not just Black murder. It is a systemic problem across the board for which racism is a critical component. Racism is a critical component in preserving the system exactly the way it is. And all of these questions are being brought to bear right now in this moment. The bottom line of the whole fact is, though, that this is a level of solidarity that terrifies the ruling elite. The solidarity that the people are galvanizing in this moment is something that clearly shows you the very different nature of two Americas. You have two entirely different Americas. One where if you spray graffiti, you'll get thrown into the back of a van and taken somewhere. And even if you're not imprisoned for a long period of time, your freedoms have still been infringed upon, and they're doing it to terrify you. And as they do it, they're telling you, America, that they are doing this to protect the community, which is a dog whistle. But when you look at the folks who showed up in Portland, what the community are they protecting if not these lily white soccer moms who are just coming out? I mean, they still had flour on their blouses from baking fresh ass cookies. I'm sorry. You know, who are they protecting? And it's a beautiful moment for solidarity, because what this group of people are starting to realize is that there's something else going on in this country. And I want to be sure this is not to venerate the protest of white soccer moms above anyone else. No, thank you for finally coming to the party. You know, we've been trying to tell you. But what's important in this is for people to realize that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what position in this country you think you have. It doesn't matter what race or privilege you benefit from. It does not matter whether you're black, white, male, female, straight, trans, gay, Christian, Muslim. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish, agnostic. It doesn't matter what you believe, where you're from, who you love, what skin your color is, what color your skin is. What matters at the end of the day is if you are challenging this power structure, if you're standing up and asserting your right to be here in a power structure that has benefit from dominating you, from exploiting you, from plundering your communities. And when they got done plundering your communities, they exploited that plundering. They exported that exploitation. And if you dare challenge the system here domestically, whether you realize it or not, like James Baldwin said, you have attacked the entire power structure of this Western civilization. And you thought you were just going out to protest some Donald Trump. That's literally it. You thought that you were going out to protest Donald Trump. And what you're coming to understand is that the intersection between Black lives and what's been done to us from this police state and the economic beneficiaries of that police state goes far beyond Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an outlier. He is a unique threat, and we got to get rid of his ass. He absolutely must go. But when he is gone, this work is not even remotely finished. The real work continues even when we have a president who can speak in complete sentences, who can express empathy, who has the intellectual prowess of a philosopher and the comportment of a gentleman or a lady or a non-gender conforming individual. And they bring all of those skills to bear to protect the exact same system that Donald Trump is using brute force to protect. That's the real fight, my friends. Patrons, stay tuned. So much more to talk about. Everyone else, patreon.com/the BPD show, or I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.